All right, we're going to switch gears now and turn to energy prices. Last week, a lot of QCA Illinois residents got letters from Mid-American talking about rate hikes. The company wants to raise gas and electric bills by about $24 a month by 2028. But this is far from an isolated incident with Mid-American. We're seeing energy prices soar all over the country with a lot of different companies. And a new national report now backs that up. Congress's Joint Economic Committee has found that across the country, Americans paid about $110 more in electricity costs in 2025 compared to 2024. But you know what? We can zoom in even further. According to that report, Iowa households paid more than 5% more for electricity in 2025 than in the year before, and Illinois families paid nearly 16% more. That's the fourth highest jump in the country, only behind Indiana, New Jersey, and the District of Columbia. We're talking more than $200 a year more. Here to help break this down for us is Illinois Representative Sean Casten, who covers Chicago's western and southwestern suburbs and is on the National Joint Economic Committee that published this report. Congressman, thank you so much for your time and being here with us today. What did you think when you saw those numbers?
So thanks for having me. I'm not entirely surprised. This has been coming for a while, and it's important. I think all of us want to. There's a tendency to make this political, and I want to separate out what's caused by politicians from what's fundamental. You've got fundamental drivers going on that whenever we see rising electric demand in the system, you tend to see upward pressure on prices, partly because utilities have to build new wires, new generation in order to serve that load, which means that they need a rate commission to approve that. And also because if they can't build fast enough to keep up with the rising load, you see more congestion in the system, and it's sort of normal supply demand pressures. And we've in fact seen that for both good and I don't know, harder to opine on reasons. More data centers means more load. Manufacturing coming back to the United States after being overseas means more load. Transportation shifting from gasoline to electric vehicles means more load. You don't have to opine on those, just to understand where those drivers are. And all of those things have been underway for the last 4 or 5 years. That's putting pressure everywhere. If you look in the granularity of the report, though, you can see a second issue, which is that the states that are most exposed to natural gas prices tend to have seen the highest rate increases. The states that are most heavily dominated by renewables have seen the smallest increases. So California, their rates actually fell by 3% during the same period. Nevada fell by 18%. These are really heavy renewable states, nuclear power states. That matters because those generators you don't have any price exposure when the price of gas moves up, because on the margin, you're not paying anything extra for fuel. And this is where you do get into the politics. At the end of the Biden administration, there was some pressure to approve LNG export terminals, natural gas export terminals, and the Biden administration said that in their judgment, under the 1935 Natural Gas Act, those projects have to be deemed to be in the national interest. And their judgment was that if you increase the pull of natural gas out of the United States, that's going to reduce supply in the United States and therefore raise prices. And so they judged that it was not in the economic interest to do that. When the Trump administration came in, they immediately reversed that rule and built those plants, and you've seen an increase in natural gas. So now you have places like Illinois where on the margin, your power prices are set by natural gas multiplied by some number, because the gas power plant throws a lot of the waste heat away. So you have this multiplier effect, and on the margin, gas is very expensive. And so pushing gas up higher has put real upward pressure on states like Illinois that depend on it. Layered on top of that is some of the curtailments of projects like the Grain Belt Express line that was going to bring in cheap wind power from Kansas into southern Illinois. That would have put downward pressure on prices. That project was blocked by the Trump administration. Some of the initiatives to give folks more resources to invest in weatherization, efficiency in their homes, that has the effect of increasing demand for electricity, because if you can't get money to make your home more efficient, you're going to use more energy to keep yourself just as warm or as well lit. And so there has been some political pressure in the Trump administration of increasing demand faster than it needs to increase and making the supply side more expensive. But layered on top of that is this long-term structural trend of rising electricity loads in the United States.
I want to look a little bit more short term, though. This committee in November, so we're talking 5 months ago, looked at this report, at the data that they were projecting to have. And then when the actual numbers came out, they were higher than what Congress thought they were going to be. Why do you think in the short term, in a 5 month period, those numbers rose more than what Congress was expecting?
Um, I'm guessing a little bit, and I'm going to sound like the nerdy engineer I am. I think there's a lot of nonlinearities in the system. Um, when you start to congest a part of the grid, each incremental unit of demand, it doesn't grow linearly. It's an exponential trend, and so I think you just have a system that's tightening up more and more. There also, candidly, has been, I don't think anybody, um, and I want to try to be non-political about this, but I don't think anybody fully thought that we would do as many economically insane things as we've done over the last year. Putting massive tariffs on every country in the world had the practical effect of increasing the cost of every single component of everything that anybody buys. And I don't think we quite anticipated, A, that the White House would do that, or B, that the courts would allow those tariffs to remain in place as long as they did. Um, so some of that is just, how do you handicap? You wouldn't have assumed people would do that. We certainly wouldn't have assumed that people would go to war with Iran and drive up the price of oil and gas as dramatically as they had without, first thinking through some of those dynamics. Now that's certainly later, but I think it's been a very hard to predict policy environment out of the White House right now, which has made it a little bit harder to get accurate predictions going forward.
Well, speaking of these layers, I'm thinking Illinois being particularly hit hard, fourth highest jump in the nation in 2025. Where do data centers fit into this?
So increasing load is always an issue. And it's just as true if you have a data center coming to your community as if you have a steel mill coming to your community. All of a sudden your utility wants to put bigger wires in, bigger transformers, build another generator, and you're going to have this equity question of should the steel mill, should the data center pay for that, should the community pay for that? And there's always a little bit of local politics involved because you'll have a local mayor, you'll have maybe a governor or a state rep saying, yeah, I know that they should pay their fair share, but oh, by the way, they're going to create jobs, they're going to create property tax revenue. So wink, wink, nudge, nudge, can you give them a break on the rates? That always happens, and I think we're seeing that play out around the country. I think the data centers are in a more difficult political position than a steel mill would be, because while a data center, like a steel mill, does provide property tax revenue, the data centers employ a lot of jobs to construct the plant, but they don't really provide very many long-term jobs as compared to, bring an auto manufacturer to the Quad Cities, bring a steel mill. That's going to create a lot of ongoing economic activity in a way that data centers don't. And so as a result, I think you've seen some pushback against data centers that's been more politically salient than other things that have historically led to questions of higher electric rates and questions of equity of who should pay for the cost of those system upgrades.
Well, then looking ahead, thinking about this time next year when we get the 2026 figures, where do you expect those to land? Do you expect these prices to be even higher next year?
Oh, if I could make predictions like that, I'd be a richer man. I'd be betting on it. Um, I think we're all nervous about the broad upward pressure on oil and gas prices because of what's happening in Iran, and don't see an easy way for that to abate. And so that's going to put some restrictions on it. On the optimistic side, if you look at what the private sector is trying to build, they are overwhelmingly, there's 2,000 gigawatts of generation waiting to get interconnected to the U.S. electric grid. That's almost twice as much generation as we have on the grid right now. And 100% of that generation, almost, squint your eyes, basically 100%, is solar, wind, battery systems. Not because people are saying I'm picking technological winners and losers, but when they're seeing a rising price environment, they're saying, I want to build the asset that has a very low price so that I can make as much money as possible against that spread. So we're starting to see some signs of the private sector responding to these price signals by building things that would bring that price down. Is that going to come online as fast as we'd like? Never does. Um, but I'm hopeful that some of those trends, with the help of of federal, state, and local permitting agencies to bring them on as quick as possible, could put some downward pressure on those rates.
We've seen Illinois state legislators trying to take action when it comes to energy prices. The Power Act is working its way through the legislature right now. If it was passed into law, it would help regulate how data centers pay for energy here in Illinois. So I want to look on a national level. How are you and your fellow legislators in Congress working to solve this problem?
So the biggest thing that we're working on from our office, my colleague Mike Levin and I introduced the Energy Bills Relief Act last week with about 100, I think we're at 122 co-sponsors out of the gate, which is a big number in Congress. Remember, there's only 435 members of Congress, so it's kind of a big deal. And what we're trying to do is to say let's better align the incentives in our energy system, so that if you're an energy producer, you know, your utility, as the rules sit right now, if I make an investment that lowers your price of energy, I lose money. If I make an investment that raises your price of energy, I can make, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, anybody who's ever run a lemonade stand knows that, would you rather pay a nickel for lemonade or 10 cents for lemonade? If you're a lemonade buyer, you'd like the nickel. If you're a lemonade seller, you'd like 10 cents. But because of those incentives, and because of the power of those regulated utilities, and the degree we need them to keep the lights on, we have the ability legislatively to change those incentives so that they can make more money when they lower your price of energy. And so what we've tried to do in this Energy Bills Relief Act is to say, let's make some changes so that as they prioritize investments, prioritize approval for other investments within their service territory that would bring rates down, let's create a situation where they see that as a victory as much as energy consumers see that as a victory. And I think ultimately we're going to need some kind of policy reforms like that, so that when those 2,000 gigawatts of generation that people want to come on show up and say, hey, can I get approval to build this on today? Everybody who has the right to say no has an incentive to say yes.
In the meantime, though, we are seeing, like we talked about, rising prices here in Iowa and Illinois. We've been reporting on it the last couple of years now that energy shortages are projected to start around our part of Illinois coming up in the next 4-ish years by 2030. So in the meantime, is there anything people can do to get relief from these prices, or anything that could give them hope looking forward?
Well, so the best opportunity that all of us have and always will have is energy efficiency. And let's try to not make that a dirty word. Sometimes that, is seen as a political measure, but if you live in a house that's drafty and the windows leak and you're spending thousands of dollars a month on your natural gas bill, and someone offers you a house that's better insulated and has windows that are sealed, that's going to make you richer, right? And so to the degree that we can go out and, maybe individually you have those resources, maybe you've already got a clean house, but you can help somebody else get those resources. Maybe you're a state legislator or a municipal legislator who can help bring those resources forward. Getting people access to more efficient light bulbs, better insulation, getting them access to, if you can, a solar panel on your roof or maybe on your school, all of a sudden that reduces the need, because if you can keep yourself warm, you can keep your home well lit, you can keep your beers cold, and you don't have to buy fuel, you're going to be richer, and you're going to be less exposed to that volatility. So, from a purely financial perspective, the best way to insulate yourself from volatility in a market you can't control is to find a way to meet your needs without participating in that market. And all of those things that we can do to invest in a more energy efficient world are good for the planet. And if you don't care about the planet, they're really good for your wallet.
Well, Congressman, I cannot thank you enough for your time. I appreciate you being here with us today and diving into this report.
Thank you very much for having me.
And if you guys at home want to share this story, our online version is up at WQAD.com underneath the As Seen on TV tab.